just finished setting up my Colnago Arabesque for my club ride tomorrow. I ride with the A group. So I usually always take my TMC team machine when I ride with those guys. They're pretty hardcore. They like to really go for it. So we'll see. I'm curious to see how the Colnago Arabesque fare, how it perform against this guy. They all have super high-end carbon bike with top of the line, everything, super light, etc. So we'll see. But I think I can keep up with those guys. I might not be able to pull too much, maybe a little bit, but I'm gonna let them exhaust themselves. I'll be right there behind them. If they drop me, so be it. I'm just doing this for the fun of it. They're not gonna hurt my feeling. It's a 66-mile ride, 2,000 feet of ascent, so a decent ride, not the hardest in the world. But my Colnago Arabesque is all ready. As you can see, I have mounted the bottle cages. The bottle are even all filled and ready to go. The ride starts at 7:30 a.m. and I ride to the starting point. It's only 8 miles, but I got to get going early, so I like to have the bike all set up, and all I need to do is just hop on the bike and get going. I have my saddlebag with the basic repair kit, particularly in case I get a flat. I have also mounted the Garmin Varia radar backlight mount. I have put the speed sensor on the rear wheel, the cadence sensor, and I've also mounted my GoPro because I want to do a video of this ride, see how it goes. And you see I have the power banks also attached to the GoPro. So I get an easy 4 hours of recording time with that setup. I made a video, by the way, if you're interested in how to do that. I have my Garmin mount, my front light mount, and I'm good to go. I've checked the front and rear derailleur just to make sure that the gear shift are smooth and crisp. So it's going to be my first group ride, or first group air ride on top of that, with the Colnago Arabesque. I'm sure those guys, they're going to be both surprised and a little amused when they see me show up with that bike. But hey. The ride turned out to be quite different from what I had anticipated. Only 2 riders showed up as opposed to the usual dozen. Those are 2 solid A riders, though I knew it was going to be a tough ride. The big group that you saw earlier was a different club, and we couldn't join them as their route was quite different and their starting and ending points were far from ours. As a result, there was no slacking off and hanging out the back on this ride. Everyone had to take time up front. As it turned out, I did the most pulling of our small group, which probably wasn't a smart thing considering I was carrying more weight than those guys. Also, the planned 66 miles ended up being an improvised 80 miles with 3,000 feet of ascent. But that was fine with me, as I need to train for 127 miles Grand Fondo coming up in September. Going up steep or long hills, I had to push harder than with my BMC to compensate for the additional weight of the bike. I had to make sure that I got to the top of the hill right on their wheels so they wouldn't drop me on the downhill. Good training. Same with accelerations coming out of turn. I had to stay alert and push it as early as possible and stay on their wheels. By the end of the ride, I could feel the difference in my leg. Well, that was a great ride. It's too bad that I got two flats in succession, actually only within a few hundred yards of one another, and that had never happened to me before. The only good thing is I was only 2 miles away from home, so I called my wife and she came and picked me up since I only had one spare tube. But the 66 miles ride, which I told you about earlier in the video, actually turned out to be an 80 miles ride with over 3,000 feet of ascent. And that was great because that really gave me an opportunity to test the Colnago Arabesque and to see what this bike is all about. And it did confirm that this is a great bike. It's a great handling bike all around. It's a very confidence-inspiring bike, I would say, in almost any circumstances. And also, it reacts to riders' input instantly, and I love this kind of nervous bike. Its two Achilles heels are one, its weight. It has a 5 to 6 pound disadvantage over a modern road bike, and that's a lot, particularly when you're going up a steep incline or a long ascent, and also when you're trying to keep up with sudden acceleration, like coming out of the corner. I definitely had to try harder with this bike than I do with my BMC Team Machine in those situations. The second Achilles heel of this bike, it's stiffness. It's a very stiff bike. And I knew that it was stiff, but it surprised me how stiff it really is, because this is a steel frame. And compared to the other steel frame that I own or I have ridden, this frame is particularly stiff. Personally, I don't mind. It was not to the point where I would hesitate to ride that bike over a long distance. I rode it 80 miles and it was fine. I would not hesitate to ride it even more than that. To me, the biggest problem was the seat. The Cinelli Volare seat is particularly uncomfortable. It just does not suit my anatomy. It's a well-made seat. There's nothing wrong with it. It just constantly kept reminding me how uncomfortable it is. Now, I would not race with this bike, but I didn't buy this bike to race it. I bought to enjoy it, and you can definitely do that, and you can do that even in a competitive way. I was impressed that, in part thanks to this bike, I was able to keep up with two solid A riders for a mile. And yes, I will take some of the credit as the rider, but I definitely give a lot of credit also to the Colnago Arabesque. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.